In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a simple deck, and this should be an easy DIY beginner's tutorial. And if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. This channel is all about DIY, save a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get a notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. It's all I ask in return for making this video. So we got a lot to go over today, so let's get started. So you know what I already have framed here and why I have it framed. We had to pour our concrete from the previous video, and this is the concrete that we poured, and we needed this up so we knew exactly where to place our slab for our landing. And these are the posts that's going to be used to support the railing. So that's why all that's installed, and I want to go over the ledger board that I have installed as well. This pressure treated 2x12 that's attached to the band board of the house is what's called a ledger board, and that's going to support the weight of the back side of the deck. And this ledger board is attached to the band board behind it using 1/2-inch lag screws or lag bolts. And I have flashing in here behind the siding, and that's a really important step you definitely got to do, because when water comes down and hits this flashing, it goes down to the ground. It doesn't hit the wood in behind it, so a very important step. And we left spacing here. It's going to be for our deck boards and for the skirt board that's going to go on the side of the deck as well. So I thought it was important to mention this before we get started so you know exactly what's used for the structure. And you could also set post and put a header board here, and you could use that instead of a ledger board if you wish and don't want to attach to the house. So that's totally up to you. When you install the ledger board, it's to be installed level. And as far as how do we get the header that's going to be in the front supporting the joists, we're going to take a board that's longer than the distance that we need, hold it here, and then we want a slight slope over to the header. So we like to do about a 1/2 inch or so per 6 foot. So if we come over here with this board to here, as you can see, if our level, we have a slight slope over to our header. That's what you want. You don't want to really install this level because you want the water to drain off your deck boards. So make sure whenever you do your header that it's installed with a slight slope from the ledger to the header. And once you got it at the elevation you want, you just mark right onto the post that's going to be attached to the header. Then that's going to mark the top of your header. So that's how we got the distance off the ground for the front. We have two different types of footers here. This one's a structural footer, so it is below the frost line because that's actually going to be supporting the weight of this little deck. And then back here, this one, it's relatively shallow because it's mainly for the railing here, because all the weight's going to be held by the ledger board. So this skirt board, or this is going to be a joist as well, that's going to be outside, that's actually going to be structural. So this is a footer that's going to be about 2 foot around as well, and it's going to have to be able to handle some weight. And yes, this is a small deck, but it's definitely important to get something that's going to be solid. And as far as what we use to fill this up with concrete, we just used Cycrete and just poured it in and filled it up with water and let it dry. Very basic, very simple idea to have a simple footer. To make sure that your footers are setting square with your ledger board and for the header, you simply just got to measure diagonal from point to point, and whenever they are the same, that means you're setting square with the ledger board. So you'd measure this way, and then we would measure this way until they are the same measurement. For the boards on the outside and the header board, they're going to be 2x8s pressure treated, and then the joists in between are going to be 2x6s. I just got to get a measurement for the width, and then we're going to pre-cut all of these to length. For the outside board, we're going up against the house to the outside of the header in this case, which ends up being 71. And the inside is simply 3 inches less than that, so we got 68. So we're going to pre-cut all the 2x6s to 68, and then the outside boards to 71. Because we're doing composite boards, we want these 1 foot on center. That's usually the best for composite. So we're going to burn 1.5 inches here off this ledger board, and then come over 12 inches and make a mark, which is right here. And then right here is where our joist will set. And we want to make sure that we put a square line down the board to mark our joist. And that's where it's going to sit. So we want to make sure that we put our layout here, and that way we can calculate the exact amount of joist that we need for this deck. We also need to put the layout on this board as well that's going to hold the floor joist. And if we pulled off this side for our layout, we need to make sure we pull off the same side over here so that way our joists line up together. We now have the layout on the ledger board and the header board. This is one of the 2x6 joists, and I'm going to measure 68, and I simply just have to make a mark right on the board at 68, then use a speed square to make my line. And we need to cut on that side of the line, and I'm just going to use a circular saw and follow the line we just made. And that's all there is to cutting the boards to length. For the floor joist sizing, as far as if you need a 2x6, 2x8, or 2x10, or 2x12, it's best to check your local building codes to see what you need to build your deck. You can also check online sources for a span chart, and I'll put a link in the description below for one, and that's going to help you determine what size floor joist you need. I'm going to start here at the end with the 2x8 and then move to the 2x6s and install them as we go. And we're just going to use small structural screws, or these are called framing screws. We're going to use that to help put all this together before we put our joist hangers on. And if you want to purchase any of this lumber or these screws or anything used in this video, check out the description below. There are all the links to the products used here. And I'm going to start by attaching this temporarily with this screw here at the end. I'm just going to place 3 of these screws at each end to hold it. When you go to install the joist, make sure you eyeball down it and put the crown up. So if you have some type of a crown, which most boards will, you want to place that up. So when there's weight pressing down on it, it helps level it out. Put it down, it just makes the deck sag more. So we want to put the crown up. We're going to place 1 screw here towards the top, just hold it into place until we put our hangers on, and then 2 on this end for the same reason, just to hold it into place till we put the hangers on. At each end of the 2x6 joist, I got to install a joist hanger per code in my area. And these simply just slide right under the joist, and then we install it using these 10-penny 1.5 inch, we call them Tico nails, but they're really just for metal strap nailing. So we slide this up here, and we're going to tack it into place with these little tabs to hold it into place. Then we just drive the nail to hold it against the ledger board or the header. And then into the side of the joist hanger. And that's all there is to installing the joist hanger, but I like to cheat by using a metal strap nailer. These are much quicker. Yeah, you have more money in it, but it's so aggravating driving those little nails. I like to use this. Now I'm going to do that to all the intersections. For this next one, I'm going to show you the metal strap nailer. We're going to hold it into place, tack it on. And with this, we line the end of the nail up into the hole, then pull the trigger and wear eye protection and ear protection. As you can see, that's much quicker and easier. It's now time to install the posts onto the frame we just built. And this is going to sit right on the outside here. And all we have to do in this case is we're going to mark the very bottom, then measure up 33.5 inches to get our peak. Using my tape measure, I'm going to hold right onto that mark with the end of the tape, then measure up to the 33.5 mark. Then we're going to mark it. I'm now going to take my speed square. We're going to mark around the whole post now. We now have a square line around the whole post. With a circular saw, I'm going to adjust the bevel to 30 degrees and before I make my cuts. With the saw on the 30-degree bevel, we're going to cut on the side of the line that's going to be the scrap around the whole post. And now we just finished the cut on each side. To anchor the post, I'm going to be using these 4.5-inch structural screws. These are made by Fasten Master, and you can find these in the links in the description below as well. To set the post, I'm going to set it right back where I marked it from. We're going to be flush on the outside of the deck with this one, but we're going to double check to make sure we're setting plumb. We'll set this up against the post, and it looks like we can shift this over a little bit. All right, so right there it's setting plumb. So I'm gonna mark this outside for now so we don't lose our mark. So we know that's the edge of the post where it needs to be setting. I'm gonna get my screw started here that's gonna hold the post. And you do not have to pre-drill with these screws. I'm gonna hold flush right where it goes. And now I'm gonna plumb this post up to make sure we're setting right. And we're setting perfect there. Now I'm gonna place a second screw here. And that's all there is setting the post, so I'm just going to do that at all the posts. Because the deck boards we got at a good price were only so long, we wanted to maximize the deck space. That's why we put the post on the outside of the framing, and because of that we had to have a way to intersect the railing on the outside. So the easiest way we came up with was just put 2 posts here, one intersect the railing on this side, then one here. But if you don't want to do it like this and you're not worried about maximizing your deck space, all you'd have to do is put your post on the inside of the board here, and that's going to allow you to intersect this way and this way, and it's going to look fine. But you will have to trim out with boards along the bottom as a place to support the decking. So that's the only bad part, and there's more cutting involved. And I know it might not be the most cosmetic looking way of doing it, but for this we're trying to maximize what we have. Because we are using composite boards, we want to make sure we flash the top of the joist. That way it extends the life of the joist, because what's the use of having composite boards for decking if your joists rot out? So this will extend the life significantly. So this more or less is just tape that tapes on the top and flashes it so the water hits it, then rolls over the side instead of laying right here on top of the joist. So really important. So what we like to do is pre-cut the length of it for the joist. So we'll cut a bunch of these and then we'll lace it over on each side where the ledger board is and the header. To begin the decking boards, you want to start from the front and work your way back, because you want your cut in to be against the house, because it's going to be hidden under the siding. And with composite boards, they sell what's called a square edge. This is not a square edge, this is a grooved edge. So you'd want to start with the square edge if you're worried about cosmetics, but this homeowner was not worried about cosmetics and said it's fine just to go with the grooved edge, because we got these boards for a good price like I mentioned. We're going to have to cut this to fit between the posts to start out. You want to mark right here where it meets the post. So that's going to fit inside from post to post. Here's the mark we made. We need to put our line here. So we're going to mark it here first. The best method to cut this composite, and this is Timber Tech by the way, so it's similar to Trex but it's just a different brand. It's just pure composite. Now with this, we want to cut the line with the circular saw just like we would anything else. Now it's best to use a miter saw with decking boards, but for this we're just going to rough cut in between, then cut them all off at once later using the circular saw. So we're just going to make this cut just like a board. We're now going to install that into place. The board is setting into place, and if you want a 1-inch overhang here, you'd simply notch around the post 1 inch so it'd slide out further. But this homeowner said they would like it flush just like we're going to do at the edges, so we're going to keep it where it's at. We're going to fasten the decking boards down to the frame using this tool made by Camo. It's called the Marksman Pro X1. It's more or less just a jig that's going to hold our screw at an angle and go through the side of the board to anchor it. We're going to use these screws that are meant to go with this tool. And it's going to be nice because the fastener is the only thing that's in here, and there's no plastic spacer or anything of that nature. So these seem to be a little more desirable and simple. So I'm going to go with this to anchor it, and it also came with the bit and with the screws to use it with the jig. In order to use this tool, we're just going to place it right in line with the joist. Then we're just going to hold it tight and place our screw here and one right in the back. Then we're just going to hold it tight and drive it into the edge of the deck board. And then the back one. And as you can see, it sunk the screw in on the side and you don't have a screw in the face, and that looks really good. For the starting board, like you see me just install, you could also face screw it and then cap the holes in order to hide the fasteners. And that's how you would install the square edge as well. For all the rest of the boards, all I have to do here is line them up with each other here on this end, because we'll cut them all the length later down here on that end. So that's where we're lined up where we want it. I'm just going to take my camo jig here. We're just going to slide it right where it belongs, and that looks good right between the two boards. And look how slick this is. We're going to pop a screw here, pop a screw here, hold it tight, and then drive it until it stops driving. On this side as well. So what that fastener does is that actually gets screwed or pre-drilled with the screw, and then it drives it home. So that's a pretty slick system. Again, it's this simple. Slide it right between the boards. Make sure we're in there properly. Place a screw here and a screw here. Then hold it tight, then drive them home. I mean, does it really get any easier than that? Awesome. So I'm going to do this down the whole board. Now that we're up along the house, we got to start face screwing the boards in order to install them. I can still get a screw in on this side with this system, but because I can't get my impact driver in through here, I'm going to have to place a screw right here at the end to hold the board down, which is totally fine. And that is all we have to do here. So I'm still going to go ahead and place this here and place a screw to hold it into place to space it properly. Now that there's a screw here anchoring it in space properly, I'm then going to pre-drill a hole here. I'm then going to use the screws we've been using to install into that hole. And we can plug this hole later if we wish, or caulk over it. For the last board right up against the house, we built this deck so that we didn't have to rip this down. It's going to slide right under here with no problem. But if you did have to rip down this last board, you just rip it on a table saw or chalk a line and use your circular saw. It'll cut just like wood, like I already mentioned. So we're going to slide this right under the siding. All right, and we can only face screw this one down because that's the only option. Because all the boards were lined up on that side, we got to cut this side off to have a straight line. In order to do that, we're just going to take our chalk line, hold it here at this first one where we had to cut the start to this last one where we had to cut the finish, then chalk and cut with a circular saw. Now I'm going to adjust my circular saw to where it ain't too deep in case it hits the side of the board while we're cutting because it's so close. And because we want the flat part of the saw on the deck, he's left-handed, so he can do this easier because we have to go from this side. So he's just going to cut this line and stay on this side and cut it straight. To finish up each end, we have to use the oscillating tool because our saw is not long enough. So we're just going to cut this off to finish the cut. Now our deck boards are cut perfectly straight and that looks really good. It's time to begin the railing, and there's a bunch of ways to do railing, so we're going to show you the easiest DIY option that we could think of for installing railing. First, going to get a measurement from the inside of this corner over flush to where the step comes up onto the deck. So we're going to get that measurement and cut 2 pressure treated 2x4s the length. This measurement is 30.5, and we're going to go ahead and cut 4, 2 for this side, 2 for the other side of the step coming onto the deck, and then install those before we get our other 2 lengths. The 2 saws I recommend having for this is a miter saw and a table saw, because we're going to rip down 2x4s for the pickets here in a moment. And the miter saw is great because we need to make 45-degree cuts for the bottom of the pickets, and it also makes simple, straight, true square cuts as well. So it's very nice to have that on hand. So we're going to take our material here and cut it to length. I'm going to put a 45-degree bevel, just come about halfway onto the 2x4 and just make a nice little bevel. So that way it looks like it'll be a little more finished here towards the end. To mark to pre-drill our screws, I'm going to come over 1 3/4 inches and then come up 3/4 of an inch. So right there will be one screw. Right here will be the other. I'm going to use an 1/8 inch drill bit with a countersink. And on this side, it's going to get hidden behind the next piece of railing. So we're just going to keep this back about 3/4 inch because it's going to be hidden. And do that to all 4 of these. The measurements I'm going with to the top of the 2x4 railing is going to be 31 and then 15.5. To install the 2x4 railing, very straightforward. We're going to use the same screws that we used earlier when we were framing the deck. We're just going to hold this 2x4 to where the top's at that mark and hold it on each mark and then drive the screw into the 4x4 post. And then do the same to the lower 2x4. And then do this method around the whole deck. It's now time to make the pickets. We're going to use these pressure-treated 2x4s to make them. So we got to rip these down in order to make all the pickets at an affordable price. So first we're going to add a little design by putting a 45-degree here. And that's going to give us a 45-degree bevel at the bottom of each picket before we rip these down. And we're going to go with 37 1/4 for the length, so we're going to cut them the length as well with the miter saw. Using a table saw set to about 1 3/4 inch light, we're going to rip down all these 2x4s to make our pickets. I'm going to pre-drill each picket because you don't want these to split whenever you're anchoring them here in a moment. The measurement's going to measure down from the square end 1 3/4 inches, and then 17, and then 34, and then we're just going to eyeball the center and pre-drill them with the same drill bit we were using with the little countersink so we don't split the pickets. And do that to all the pickets. To install the pickets, it's important to go by the code in your area as far as how wide they can be. We can't have a gap in between picket to picket any more than 4 inches in my area. What a lot of people will do to get it even without having to calculate the distance between for them to space evenly is just start with a picket in the center of the railing, and then just take a 2x4 and gap them evenly, and then if we come up to the end, might have to have a space that's not exactly the end, but it'll be close. But what we're going to do, we already calculated the distance here. We cut a block 3 7/8. We want to go at the top and bottom to space out our pickets. Then we're going to use those as spacers to screw them here, and that's going to leave us about the same equal distance at each end. And we're just going to use standard deck screws here, and these are only 2.5 inches long because we don't want them too long because they'll go through and then poke out the other side. So we're going to start here at this edge and work our way this way. So I'm going to place my screws into the holes we pre-drilled to get them started, and then go ahead and anchor them as we go. So we're going to put a spacer here, and then a spacer here. Make sure we're flush at the top of this 2x4. Drive our screw, and then drive this screw, and then move our spacer here to the bottom. There's the first picket installed, and to continue this, we're just going to use that same method and space them evenly as we go across. And that's all there is to installing the pickets. I'm going to show you another way you can put the pickets on that's going to be a little easier to figure. If we come over 9 3/4 here to this mark, that's going to put our picket to where the gap is in the center and our picket starts here. So I'm going to start here with a plumb line, and this is going to be our starting point. So just show you how you can start in the center plumb, and then that's going to give you an easier way to come out even on each side. Then our picket would go here. So our 3 7/8 inch gap will be here right in the center, and then we'll have the exact same ends on each side, so the gap's going to be perfectly spaced this way. As you can see, that way it gives you the exact same gap here at the end without having to calculate a lot of numbers, and that's going to be a little easier for most people. To finish up the top of the railing after the pickets are installed, it would be best to install a 2x4 or a pressure treated 2x6 right on top of here to cover up the open ends of the pickets. But this homeowner does not want anything capping this for whatever reason. But if we were to, we would just install it right on top of this. And in fact, I would recommend a 2x6 just because you would start from the edge of this post and it'd come clear out to the end. And here's a scrap piece of 2x6. This isn't pressure treated, but I'm just showing you for example. It would cover up everything really well. You come up to the end of this post. As you can see, that'd give you a nice top. Here is a side porch that we also did. As you can see, using this system, it turns out really well. It's simple and it looks really good after it's all put together. Just as a reminder, don't forget to stain the deck after 4 to 6 months. You definitely need to make sure you hit the pressure treated material with stain. It will extend the life of it and it'll help it look much better. And obviously the composite decking, you don't have to do that, which that's the biggest benefit to composite decking. If you'd like to see how I poured and finished this concrete landing, check out this video. It'll help you out.